Well, the snow on Hoosier Pass could use a refresher. And while the forecast for the week was pretty promising, it produced in other parts of Colorado, but barely dropped anything up on Hoosier. I had been really hoping for the opportunity to try out my new Voilé HyperVector BCs in powder, but after poking around on a few of my favorite meadows, nothing was really working out. It was all fairly hard pack, maybe just a little bit of dust on crust. So I decided I just needed to make lemonade by working on using my edges on firm snow. After all, I now have what Voilé calls a directional carving ski. In prior videos and earlier clips in this video, you can see how I tend to ski. I tend to kind of shuffle my skis and maybe pivot them to turn a little bit, but I don't really ride my edges. In order to try to get away from using my poles for balance, I have recently started trying to poke the snow outside of my outside or downhill ski when turning, or just trying to not use my poles at all. But still, things weren't really coming together for me. But I would say it's in the clips that you are currently watching on this little slope right here that I started to feel ever so slightly what the concept of counter rotation meant. And that was allowing me to ski with a little bit of angulation and get up on my edges and kind of ride those through the turn a little bit. Now, I'm not at all trying to approach this video as instructional for other people because I'm not skilled or experienced enough to really give other people tips besides maybe the very basics. But I do want to document my own learning process. I think sometimes really experienced people can have a little bit of the curse of knowledge bias, and they don't realize what other people don't know as they are trying to explain things to them. We might throw around terminology or whatever, and sometimes you just need to experience the sensation before you can really know what the term means. So I milked that slope for all it was worth and couldn't wait to get out again the next day to keep practicing counter rotation and angulation. In my opinion, even though I'm sure I'm not doing it properly, I find Telemark skiing in powder to be pretty easy. For me anyways, the Telemark turn in powder was more intuitive than the parallel turn in powder. But while parallel turns seemed pretty intuitive on firm snow, Telemark turns have not been. That's where all my bad habits seem to result in bad outcomes. One thing I've noticed is I can never ski firm snow Telemark style because my rear ski just seems to get out of control and skitter all over the place. I've tried to prevent this by putting more weight on my rear ski by keeping that rear foot under me a little bit more. This on firm snow has resulted in catching an edge a little bit more as I try to drive the ski through the turn. I guess theoretically anyways, the proper way to prevent the ski from skittering so much is to put it on its edge. That way it's cutting into the snow, almost creating maybe 2 pressure points on either side of it that would keep it from skittering, just like powder keeps it from skittering because there's pressure on both sides. So then the problem becomes, how do you balance on an edge? I can stand on a flat ski all day long, but standing on a sideways ski with a binding that's on top of the ski, as the top of that ski becomes the side of the ski, that's another story. I guess the inexperienced skier like me defaults to banking into turns, kind of leaning into the turn, just like maybe a cyclist would lean in their turn as they're going around a sharp corner. The thing is, I don't want to have to go as quickly as a cyclist does, where all the counter forces and stuff work out. I want to stay in control. So if banking is not an option then, well, I guess that's where counter rotation comes in. As I understand it, counter rotation is rotating the upper body in the opposite direction that the skis are turning, effectively really just keeping your upper body pointing towards the fall line. This allows the skier to basically do a full body crunch over their ski, so that as their lower legs bank to get the skis on edge, the rest of the body balances that out by staying up over the ski. As with riding a bicycle, this does seem to be a little bit easier with some forward momentum, maybe a little bit of speed, but it does mean you don't need as much speed as you would to bank on your edges. But again, even cyclists seem to use concepts similar to counter-rotation and angulation as they make their turns. The bike might bank, but the body counters that a bit. So it's just a little more second nature on a bike, and we don't really reflect on it, but it's happening. After mulling over all these concepts in my mind and practicing them on low-angle slopes, my progression led me to a 20-degree slope that then flattens out a bit to see if I could do this on some steeper angle stuff. It kind of worked, but of course it's just a work in progress for now. One more situation where I think counter-rotation and angulation are helpful is doing a skid stop, which I kind of attempt right here. Well, I figured I was done practicing for the day, so I headed over the ridge to go ski some hopefully colder powder on the north face. Powder is of course still the holy grail, even though I was here working on carving. But apparently, despite the really cold temps since the last time I had skied powder on this slope, the snow had turned firm and was basically the same as the southwest facing slopes. So here I am getting more opportunities to work on riding my edges around a turn. Even though it wasn't powder, that was rather enjoyable, and I figured I'd do it another time or two. I feel like maybe all the practice was starting to pay off. My turns were looking a little better, just maybe. Let's do one final run for good measure. The upper part of this slope is a little crusty for my liking, but the lower part is lovely, so let's get to that. Like shallow hidden boilerplate here and there. Down here is where it gets lovely. Thanks for watching and listening.